Aye.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Mr. Calise.
Aye.
Ms. Gregg.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
And President Beke.
Aye. That takes us to our agenda item for proclamations, honors, and awards of recognition, and resolutions of recognition. Mr. Harris, do we have any of those this evening?
We do not, Madam President.
Thank you. Then that takes us into our first public comment period, as I mentioned before, reserved for residents who have contacted the city clerk prior to the meeting to request the opportunity to address council. Again, please begin comments with your name and block of residence for the record, and the duration is limited to no longer than 3 minutes. Mr. Harris, do we have those public comments this evening?
Yes, we do. First, we have Ivan Acosta-Velez.
Terrific. Thank you. Mr. Acosta-Velez, come on up. Good evening.
Can you double check if it's on? Is it a red?
Is there a little red light on the button there?
Now, do you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Don't take those seconds off of
I
me.
reset the
My
timer.
name is Ivan Acosta Velez. I live at 804 Highland Avenue. Mi nombre es Iván Acosta Velez, y si me está oyendo, vivo en el 804 de la Highland. Many blessings for council in the city, and also many for the citizens here in Lancaster. It saddens me to be here again because we are raising taxes. We're raising fees. We're raising whatever we want to raise. And I know things have gotten up. And most of you have been and tried to buy some eggs and milk, and you know how expensive it is. So poor people like me, because now I'm a senior citizen, it's going to be very hard. One of the things that's so important is that you say it's not the taxes that you're going to raise them, but you're raising all the fees. All the fees, if you're going to go to the city, they're going to be raised. You know, you're doing everything at the same time. The city's not going to fall apart, but you're going to have a lot of great people like me, okay, that won't be able to afford their home, okay? Now, the rich can, okay? And we're trying to get more minorities to stay in the city, okay? The rich minorities to stay in the city, but this poor old man can if you continue. You're raising the water, you're raising the sewer, you're raising the garbage, whatever you want to call it, you're raising. It sounds good, but did you, as council, make plans for this to happen? The economy is not going to be good, okay? And it sounds good. Oh, it's just 8. Okay, 8 there, 11, 12 here. Did you make any plans for the problems that are coming? If we have a big snowstorm and we can't afford it, we always tell Harrisburg to resolve it. You know they haven't resolved it. Okay? We need for you as council to make plans. You're making plans. Oh, we're going to raise it. But if something happens here, what's going to happen to the old people? And if you're out there and you're old, I don't know where you see me, think about it. Okay? We want to live the little bit that we have in our home. Okay? You're a landlord. Are you going to pass this to all your people that live in your, Of course. So it's going to be hurting everybody. You can sit there and say, oh, we don't like Ivan because Ivan says it like it is. You make a party when I go to 30 Millinger Cemetery, but while I'm still alive, I'm going to say what I say. You can tag me whatever you want to tag me. But the people out there are the ones that know what Acosta does, okay? You might get upset because I think it's because when it's election, hi. We don't want more highs. We want solutions so you don't raise taxes so high. Right now, if something happens, do you have it?
Acosta.
Huh? Just give me a second, because sometimes they give other people seconds.
Give me the heads up.
Let me tell you something very important that you need to understand. I don't see a plan to resolve this. You got all this bunch of money from the federal government to resolve this, and you're doing it. Think about it. Make it smaller. We're not saying you don't have to raise it, but make it smaller. And I'm sorry I took a couple of seconds, so pardon me.
You're fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Acosta-Velez. Mr. Harris, are there additional commenters this evening?
Yes, Madam President. Next would be Crying Christian.
Is Mr. Christian here?
I do not see Mr. Christian.
I do not. All right. We do have a second public comment period, and I will ask if he's in attendance when we get to that on our agenda. Are there additional comments this evening, Mr. Harris?
Yes, next is Alana Beth Rosen.
Ms. Rosen.
I'm not
That's just fine. Thank you, Mr. Harris, and good evening. Microphone stuff. I don't think it was. I heard it work earlier.
I want to make a correct pronunciation because some people are mispronouncing. My correct name is pronounced Ilana Beth Rosen. I was here a couple of weeks ago and I talked about a need for people like myself and others who are in walkers, who may have non-visible disabilities, to make changes. I have spoken to some of you council members. I have spoken with you as well, President Bakay. I felt it was irresponsible of you to not reply back to an email I sent to you or not reply back on anything you and I discussed. I also find it unprofessional when I've been working very nicely with Councilwoman Diaz, who's been looking into some things for me. And some of the council members felt it was appropriate to imply that Councilman Diaz doesn't know what she's doing. She's been corresponding with me, and I appreciate that. But the message here is Lancaster has an opportunity. I may be in a wheelchair. People may have other invisible disabilities, but we are taxpayers here too, and we have a right to be included and be treated equally, and we are not. And Lancaster is missing the opportunity to make the improvements and the necessary changes so that we can be a part of some of the city's activities, some of the city's programs, and involved in some of the city's, sorry, I forgot the word, some of the programs in the city. There is no reason why changes can't be made. We're not talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. We're talking about changes which could only be a couple of $100. Talking to our businesses, talking to some of the buildings, even our local governments, not all of them are handicap accessible. In fact, this building here, your front entrance, I'm a deaf person. The person at their window refused to put their mask down so I can lip read. That is unexcusable. You had a shield. I get the need for safety. But you are missing an opportunity, and we want to feel included and equal in this city. We live here too. We pay our taxes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rosen. Mr. Hopkins, would you be able to take that microphone? Thank you very much. Mr. Harris, are there additional comments this evening?
Yes, next is Sean Demensik.
Mr. Devensick. Good evening.
Good evening, Sean Demensik, 400 block of Fremont Street with the Catholic Worker Movement in the city. Thank you, Council President. I'd like to offer my comment today as a welcome to our newest councilor. Sadly, I was unable to be present for your appointment, but I do wish to say a few words of welcome. He has stepped up for a difficult, time-consuming, and often thankless task, motivated by a love of his neighbors and a commitment to housing justice, equity, and a spirit of welcome. In honor of this noble decision, I'd like to offer him another round of applause. Sorry, it's a small crowd. It's not as thunderous as I was hoping, but do what I can. However, unfortunately, Councilor Ahmed, as you well know, you and I have been chosen to live in interesting times. Evil abounds, and often those who speak most of justice are guilty of the greatest tyranny. And I do have a negative element to my comment as well. Your job will not be easy. Not only do we, the politically active citizens of Lancaster, require you to defend our rights, Tragically, there are also those downtrodden and suffering citizens who see no point in coming to council because their rights are so routinely ignored that they've often forgotten the great dignity of their humanity. As you know, I've been speaking at council for the last 3 months, this is my 7th time, begging in God's name to revise the absurd, cruel, unconstitutional, and violent portions of the city code which forbid the homeless from sleeping in public parks even when there is nowhere else to go. Likewise, I have pleaded with the mayor to give a moratorium on enforcement of this policy while the council makes revisions. To this day, nothing official has happened, while there have been some positive conversations. And even as winter now begins, despite that overflowing shelters are turning people away and sometimes handing out sleeping bags, the law of Lancaster allows the police to give every unhoused man, woman, and child in Binns, Culleton, or Musser a police citation, a criminal citation at this very moment. Councillor Ahmed, I want you to know as well about some of the obfuscations that we've encountered. There are those who say, stop talking about the right to rest and support the affordable housing projects. As we said last month, both are necessary. Today, I must respond to those who say, stop complaining to us and go bother the Republican county commissioners. They're the real problem. First of all, I've come here because I live here. And the unhoused people that I know sleep in city parks and are harassed by city police. Second, how can anyone who proclaims far and wide how progressive, how inclusive and equitable they are, take a moral high ground against Republicans when that same person does nothing to overturn a discriminatory, unconstitutional, and cruel ordinance which oppresses the poor in their own jurisdiction? As the divine teacher once said, "You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck that is out of your brother's eye." They can certainly call on me to rebuke the Republicans if
30
they are stubborn
seconds.
as they say, and I will attend the ribbon cutting of affordable housing projects if they are truly affordable, but not before the city government does its duty to reform the unjust anti-homeless laws by recognizing the right to rest. I look forward to discussing with you further, Councillor Ahmed, as we work to defend the natural law, housing justice, and human rights here in Lancaster. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Domencic. Mr. Harris, are there additional comments this evening?
I'm sorry, we have one more this evening. Mary Kate Freeman.
Ms. Freeman, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary. I'm a mother. I'm a nurse. I'm a resident of the 800 Plum/400 Clay Street community, Ross community, and from a family affected by gun violence. So I was outside Sunday, December 11th, with my 10-month-old son moving a car alone for street cleaning. I saw the police but had no idea what was going on, and there was an active shooter on the loose. So how can we better notify the residents of this community to avoid this? I usually receive municipal notifications about trash, sewer, water services, offices being open, but my phone failed to ring. To my knowledge, it's pretty standard in the media community that no one received notifications. Twitter is less used, especially by the elderly, and I think we could brainstorm a better communication system, especially when my child and myself were in danger. Thank you.
Ms. Freeman, thank you very much.
Council President, may I please respond?
Mayor Sarachi.
Ms. Freeman, I am so sorry for what happened in your neighborhood and many neighborhoods across the city, because these incidents are happening in various areas of the city. And I asked, once I saw that your comment was coming, I did talk to the chief specifically about this, and County Dispatch typically does the notifications for us if they can locate phone numbers attached to addresses in the area that we're responding to. There were notifications that were sent out this time during the Nextdoor app, but that app is wholly insufficient for what we need. In January, I'll be talking more about a 311 system. That is an app in which we will be able to geocode locations and be able to push out emergency information. The way that our officers responded, in my view, and this is just my perspective, helped to save lives because they responded so quickly and the shooter was unable to shoot anyone else. I will also say that the neighbors were incredibly helpful in responding to the police incident. And it is my wish that this does not ever happen again in our city. And I thank you for coming tonight, and I share your concerns and worry.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Harris, do we have any further comments this evening?
We do not.
Thank you very much. That takes us to our agenda item for reports requested by council. Do we have any of those this evening, Mr. Harris?
We do not, Madam President.
Thank you. That will take us to the reports of council committee meetings that were held on December 5th. We begin with public safety. Councilor Diaz.
The committee did not meet, although I would like to address the situation in Lancaster and how so many lives have been lost. And I feel for you as a resident of Lancaster City. Sometimes I even try to dodge because I never know if something is a firecracker or if there's an actual gun being shot in the city. And it can be very emotionally draining, but there are places where you can get assistance if you feel that you are not feeling safe and you need someone to speak to. So you can reach out to me and I can direct you to those places where they do have counseling for our residents and for anyone that needs it. So that's all I have to say, President Baker.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. Public Works Committee, Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Council President. We did meet this past committee meeting, and there are two items that we discussed on the agenda. One is a resolution to seek a grant for a water transmission main replacement, and the second being another grant application, and this one in particular is to, just a second, and while I'm looking for this, I want to thank my other committee members for helping in my absence. But there is a second resolution that we'll be discussing later, which is a grant application for upgrades to the Conestoga pump station. And again, we can discuss a bit more later.
Great.
Thank you. And that's the end of the report.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. Economic Development Committee, Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Council President. The Economic Development Committee did meet. I gave a brief update regarding the ARPA funds received by the city, notifying the public that a RFP was released regarding the funds to be invested in community facilities. Those proposals are being accepted through 11 a.m. on January 3rd, 2023. And we do have two more info sessions on December 20th at 1 p.m. and one on January 4th at 4 p.m. Where we'll be able to answer any questions that the public has. That information will be posted on PenBid as well as the City of Lancaster, PA.com. That concludes my report, Council President.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. The Finance Committee, which I'll be taking for the report this evening. The Finance Committee did meet on Monday, December 5th, and there were 8 items on the agenda. Most were covered under the budget overview presentation, which was provided by Director Hopkins. Bill number 24, adopting the 2023 city budget, is also related to the following items. Bill number 25, which sets new real estate tax rates at 12.64 mils. Bill number 26, which proposes a new rate for inside water customers with an average increase of 15 per quarter for the average water customer. Bill number 27, which proposes new sewer rates. This would increase $24 per quarter for the average sewer customer. We additionally discussed resolution number 93, which sets new stormwater management fees for the city. This proposed increase would be $5 per quarter for the majority of property owners in the city, and resolution number 94, setting in new solid waste and recycling fees, which would be, the proposed increase would be $6 per quarter increase for residential customers. All of these items will be on the agenda for our next meeting on December 20th, and additionally, during that meeting, I will be providing a much more detailed interim report of the budget hearings, which were held on Saturday, December 10th, so after this meeting on the 5th. We also discussed bills number 28, which appropriates the American Rescue Plan Act funds for the purposes of revenue replacement in the 2022 budget, and resolution number 91, appointing an auditor for the city, and both of those items will come up on our legislative agenda this evening. That concludes the Finance Committee report and takes us to Community Planning. Councilor Craig.
Thank you, Council President. Community Planning did not meet.
Thank you, Councilor Craig. Personnel Committee, Counselor Kalixt.
Thank you, Council President. The Personnel Committee did meet on Monday, December 5th, and reviewed nominations for reappointment to the City Revitalization and Improvement Zone Authority and the Zoning Hearing Board. That concludes my report, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Counselor Kalixt. That takes us into our legislative agenda this evening. The first item are nominations for appointment, and that is right back to you, actually, Counselor Kalixt.
Thank you again. And now I make a motion to reappoint Faith Gregg and Rebecca Addington to the City Revitalization and Improvement Zone Authority, and each for a term from January 1st, 2023 to January 1st, 2028.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any counselor comments on the motion for these appointments? And from the public on these appointments? Mr. Acosta-Velez, your comments on the appointments.
It'll be less than 3 minutes. Two things we talked about. Ivan Acosta-Velez, 804 Highland. Is the person here that we're nominating? It's you?
Yes, one is Counselor Craig, and the other was present at the committee meeting in which her reappointment was discussed.
A lot of people that have come and made comments to you, and I've heard them, that they want to see the people. Okay, you can see them, you know them, you check their background, but people want to see them here, so they know who to contact or who to. So I think we should do that, especially, we see you, amen, we know you, but the other person that we're nominating. So please do that. People have asked. They've come here and told you that they want to see the people. It's not only me. So please bring the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta-Velez. Any further comments on the appointments? I'll just note that the general practice is to have them come to the committee meetings in which the Personnel Committee discusses their appointments and gets to ask them questions. And those are, obviously, they happen monthly when those appointments come up, but are also available. We don't necessarily always ask them to come back once their appointment has been moved out of committee. But your comment is well taken. Thank you. All right, hearing no additional comments on the appointments, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Ahmed? Aye. Mr. Arroyo?
Aye.
Mr. Kalisz?
Aye.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
And President Beke.
Aye. That takes us to item B, items in the Heritage Conservation District. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Madam President. Considering the following application and recommendation from the Historical Commission for improvements to a property in the Heritage Conservation District. We have one this evening. 347 North Queen Street, LLC, owner of 347 North Queen Street, proposes construction of a new 7-story multifamily residential building with a ground floor commercial space at the corner of North Queen and East Lemon Streets, and that was recommended for approval by the Historical Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Counselor Craig?
Who's the second?
Counselor Craig.
I think what we're going to do is have Douglas come and address this. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Smith.
Hi, good evening, Council President, Mayor, Councilors. Special hello to Mr. Ahmed, Councilor Ahmed. Good to see you all. Councilors, this is a 7-story mixed-use project at 347 Queen Street. This is located at the intersection of North Queen and Lemon Street. If you can picture that intersection, the Belvedere is directly catty-corner to where the site is. This is currently a parking lot. The city has been engaged with the developer on this site for approximately 1 year. The developer has received nearly all of the approvals for their project, including zoning, shade trees, land development approvals, and it has also been thoroughly vetted by our Fire Bureau and Building Code staff. Last week, the Planning Commission provided a conditional approval for the land development plan. The redevelopment of this parcel in particular has been a long time coming for such a prominent corner in our city. The certificate of appropriateness that's before you this evening is one of the final steps for this project before building permits can be issued. I do want to note that the project will need to return to council for a small public right-of-way easement in the future, and then that would likely be the final approval for the project at a public meeting. The Historical Commission voted to approve the project without conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. We also have the developer, Mr. Richards, and the project architect, Mr. Weaver, here to answer any questions as well.
Douglas, Director, we did do the sewer plan module for this, didn't we?
Yes, that is correct. You did.
Are there any questions from council?
If I may. How many units did you say again? 7?
72? 72 units?
72 units?
Yes, 72 units.
And out of those 72 units, are there any affordable apartments that will be available?
This is not an affordable housing project, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from council?
Council President, if I may, are there any concerns about what this is going to do to the parking in the area? Is there going to be any parking for the proposed new 72 units? And if so, what is that going to look like?
Good question, Councilor. So this project is in our central business district where there is not a requirement to provide parking for the development. So in this case, there is not a requirement, though the developer is providing a select number of parking spaces on the ground floor of the building. And Mr. Richards, could you remind me what that number is offhand? 15 parking spaces would be provided. There is commercial retail on the ground floor, and there is a parking garage, just about catty corner to this site at, it's Market and Queen Street there. So residents would have the option of securing a space there or another nearby parking garage.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Mr. Smith, I have a question. There's a note about, if I'm reading this correctly, that there was a proposed demolition and a proposed new construction, and the certificate of appropriateness being issued is for new construction. Is there actually any demolition?
There is not
In this
any
project?
building demolition for
Okay.
this project.
So it is just a parking lot at this time?
Correct,
Great.
yes. Thanks for catching that language. It would be presented as a separate certificate here if it were demolition. So removal of the, I guess there might be a toll booth there for parking,
Yeah.
the asphalt itself, landscaping, but no structure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I may, Council President, I have a question for you. What will be the impact of this project on the community in terms of economic impact?
That's a good question and a big one. I'll take a stab at that, and Director Dels, if you do want to chime in, let me know. So we are in a housing crisis still in the city. As we know, we really require thousands of units, upwards of 2,000 units to meet the demand that we currently have in the city. So I think one of the biggest impacts of this project, and really any sizable residential project, is it takes pressure off of the market. It helps introduce supply into the market, which in the long term is one way of driving prices of housing down. So that certainly is the hope. I think that there's an economic benefit in that regard. And I think providing new housing options and opportunities for residents will be bringing residents downtown and making this a welcoming place for people to be. The 300 block of North Queen Street is an exceptionally important part of the city because of its retail environment. This project does add additional retail square footage on the ground floor on that block, which is a very important offering from this development. Not only that, but it's bringing a density of residents that we hope will contribute to the success of the 300 block going forward. Those are a couple of the things that do come to mind, but certainly there's construction and design jobs that are a result of this project going forward too.
Another question. did you consult the community? Do they know about this project? And what was the feedback if you consulted them?
Sure. So this project did go through at least a half dozen public meetings where we have resident members such as yourself who participate in a variety of different boards and commissions. I know that we had 2 planning commission meetings, I think 1 shade tree commission meeting. This is our 2nd city council meeting. I know that there was additional press coverage as well in the newspaper at multiple points through the project. So the main venue that we've been communicating with the public has been through the public forums that we set up for development approvals.
And what company is in charge of this project? Or are you guys gonna hire people who live in the community to work on this project also? Or?
Mr. Richards, do you mind answering that question briefly?
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Matt Richards with the development company. We are absolutely going to be hiring local labor to build the project. The contractor is a local contractor, and people only can drive so far every day. So it's going to be people who are local or within a couple miles or 10 miles or whatever to be able to build the building.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Council President.
Counselor, please. Okay. Counselor Walsh.
Thank you, Council President. I have a few questions. I think some may be aimed at Mr. Richards and some may be for the department. So I think my first question, while I have you here, can you explain a little bit further how this particular project aligns with the city's housing strategy at present? So I know that there was a lot of different aims here. Can you talk about why this one is significant?
Sure. Let's see, I don't have all these numbers committed to memory, but the interim housing plan does have a goal of creating, I think, 2,000 new units or so. Thank you. I got that number right. I see the mayor nodding. 72 units does not come very often, as we know. The next largest project that we've had was Landis Place on King, before that Stadium Row. But if this project also moves forward, that will only be 3 new multifamily projects in the city since 40 or 50 years ago. So the supply is long overdue. It's certainly in demand, as we can tell from housing price and sales. Creation is one of the 4 pillars of that interim housing strategy, and this definitely accomplishes that. We also we know that there is a mismatch between the types of units that we need in the market and what's in the city, and some of you have heard us, various staff, speak to this issue. So this project does provide the single bedroom units that we need in the city at present. Smaller square footages are in demand as well, so this project provides a diversity of units. I know that the developer was striving to provide, I think, 3 or 4 different types of units at varying sizes to meet different price points and preferences in the market. So that is also a major attribute of this development.
Great, thank you. And I think the rest of my questions are for Mr. Richards.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening.
Of course.
I just have a few questions. Do you have any estimates of what the rates will be for the studios and 1-bedrooms? A range would suffice. I understand it's hard to nail down without construction being complete and so on and so forth.
It is a little difficult to say what the cost of units will be in 2024, which is when this building would open. We would expect the vast majority, if not all the units, to be less than $2,000 a month, which is probably less than $2,000 a month, which is probably the best I could really narrow that down. I would assume some will be closer to 1,500. It's a pretty large range there.
Okay. And then, as you're thinking through design elements, was there any public art consideration? I mean, that's a pretty visible corner there, especially in our business district. Is that on the radar at all?
Absolutely. We've had discussions about that, and with a public art director, and we're considering that still. If budget allows for it, we have a spot reserved on the building for a mural of some sort. So we'll see how construction goes.
Great, thank you. And then my last question is, have you developed anything in Lancaster or have worked in collaboration with any local developers before? Here?
In Lancaster, no.
Okay. Where have you developed?
I've developed in New York City,
Okay,
Brooklyn, in White Plains, New York, in Hoboken, New Jersey. So this is my first in Pennsylvania.
welcome.
Thank you.
Do you live in Lancaster City?
I do.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. Are there any further council comments?
I think.
Councilor Cleese?
If I may, so if you don't know the rate of the apartments for the residents of the community, and so you don't know either if they're gonna be affordable, so you don't take into account their incomes, do you? So because if you think that they're gonna be affordable, you would have an idea about the rates.
I gave a rough range of rates, and we know what income bands would allow for people and to rent in that range. So we believe that there will be sufficient demand for apartments in that price range between those two.
And what were the criteria that you used to get to the rate?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, what were the criteria that you used to get to those rates,
Oh,
to the range that you're talking about?
Well, they're both the minimum rates necessary to generate an economic investment, one. Two, there's a minimum, there are federal guidelines on what is considered rent burden and not for a person, and how much they could be spending per month. And so we have an understanding of what those rents would be required for a certain person of a certain income. And so we were able to back into whether those rents are achievable or not. And third, we're able to see from other projects in Lancaster City and nearby townships of what new construction apartment rentals are renting for. And so between all three of those, we have a range of rents that we believe are warranted.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Bakay, or President Bakay, may I just pull the lens back a little bit? And this isn't specific to your project, Mr. Richards, but just to say that through the work of Douglas and his team in planning, there are 1,100 units that have been approved through the pipeline of land development. There is some pretty serious concern about those 1,100 units actually coming out of the ground. We've never seen this level of residential investment. I think I'm just going to highlight what Mr. Smith mentioned. We haven't seen new residential units coming into the city in this volume of interest in at least 50 years. The first new construction of new units was at Stadium Row, and they are market rate units. I'm also just going to contextualize that part of the reason why it's so hard to pin down what the rents are going to be is because day to day, the costs for materials continues to change. And so what is being proposed here is clearly not an affordable housing project. It is a market rate project. Those market rate projects are important for all the reasons that we had a conversation about related to assessed value, earned income tax revenue, building permits, and so on that we had in the context of our meeting on Saturday related to the budget. Additionally, I want to just note that the Henkin project, which was approved and was going to happen across the street on Queen Street, sort of just like a block down from where this project is, was specifically intended to serve LGH fellows that are coming here to work, learn, visiting nurses, other residency programs, other folks that are affiliated with the hospital. These 72 units are actually going to be constructed before those the apartment buildings that Henkin proposed initially. And so I imagine, and I don't have any information about, I haven't even met you before, hello. I have no information about his pro forma or what they're looking at in terms of potential renters, but I see this project as a direct benefit to our hospital and to the downtown.
Thank you, Mayor Sirachi. Additional council comments?
I just have one last comment,
Councilor
Council
May.
President. Thank you. Sir, do you foresee this helping us preserve the stock of single-family homes in some of the neighborhoods?
I would say we're not disrupting any single-family homes with this construction. There's no demolition component. I believe the more units you have, the better tenants and homeowners are able to self-sort themselves into housing situations that fit their own criteria, and that they're not having to make compromising decisions on where they live.
Yeah, I guess my question is more directed towards if we have these, studio or one-bedroom units, would that, help kind of mitigate those folks who are moving into the city and moving into residential single-family homes, which, if you understand what I'm saying.
Sorry, I misunderstood your original question. So I believe you have a lot of units a lot of buildings in this town that have been were single-family homes and were chopped up into multifamily dwellings, sometimes of lower quality. I think the more market rate units you have, the less need there will be to do that, and the less opportunistic investors would see to do that. If the people aren't able to increase the rents of those single-family buildings by dividing them up, then because there's other apartments to rent, I think you would be preserving housing by that standard. That helps.
Yes, thank you.
And I would just add it also as relieving the burden of a 72-unit apartment. What comes when you do multifamily in neighborhoods that don't have parking garages that are accessible. And so we already know our neighborhoods are overrun with cars. And by building in the central business district, that pressure for parking there's a pressure valve, which is our public parking garages. So I'm just putting that out there because we struggle so hard with parking in our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mayor Sirachi.
Yeah.
I'll also, to respond to that, to put a little bit more context, back when we were discussing the interim housing plan, one of the important things that came out of that discussion was people being not in the right size of units. So people who could potentially rent a one-bedroom or even a studio being in a larger unit in a residential neighborhood. And this could alleviate a situation like that, which is in line with our interim housing plan. Additional council comments? Councilor Walsh?
Thank you. Are you going to be the ultimate owner of this property? So are you developing and then remaining the owner?
Our plan is to build and operate the property, and maybe with a third-party management company that's local, but we'll probably be the owners, at least for the time being.
Okay. And then the mic is a little soft. You said you're going to employ a third-party management company from a local.
Probably a local. I mean, yes, it has to be staffed locally.
Yeah,
So
it sure does. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you, Douglas.
All right. Any public comments on the proposal? Mr. Acosta Velez.
Hola, my name is Ivan Acosta Velez. Two things. What did, if they haven't changed the name, Downtown District, have to say about this project? Did they change the name, or do we still have did?
No, they are, that's.
Okay, did they give any input to this? Did we do a parking analysis? You're talking about 72, not 16, not 50. And they won't have off-street parking. I know they don't have to. It looks good, but how is it going to affect the businesses we have there that are local, most of them? They're single people, most of them. Okay, do we have any of those answers? Because I haven't heard any of them. No.
I think the parking questions and the impact in the neighborhood, that's all part of the Planning Commission. This is coming to us with a recommendation from Planning Commission. So those issues were addressed in another process that happens with people who look in much greater detail. Additionally, I would say that when I talk to small business owners downtown, they're super excited about having more people because that means more customers.
I think, Mayor, you're not getting the issue, okay? And we know you have those things. You haven't done those studies, Mayor, okay? Let me finish. Okay, parking there, one of the people that used to take care of my eyes moved out of town, Dr. Osborne, because he didn't have parking, okay? And he was there more than, I'm not going to say, okay? So what I'm trying to say, it sounds really cool. I'm not against the project. What are we doing so the project looks better? So when I go to buy or go to the Beverly or whatever, parking is there. You know what I'm saying? You're talking about 72 and there's only 15 parking spots. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Not even half you have parking. So that's going to be taking, there's people that live there, they're elderly. You know? So we need to look at that. I know unless we want all these apartments in the city to be budgeted at this and then get the poor out of the city, amen. That's what you want. But you need to look at this. It's very important, please.
Thank you, Mr. Costa-Velez. Ms. Byrd, good evening.
Good evening. Darlene Byrd. Just a couple questions. I heard that you said rents are going to be between $1,500 and $2,000. How many studio units are you going to have, and how many are one bedrooms? It's only going to be studios and one bedrooms, right? Not 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. You don't know? Oh, okay. The other question that I had is, we talk about taxes. Are you getting any tax abatement for building this as economic in the city?
If I could respond to that since he doesn't have a microphone.
Okay.
Everyone who does new construction, renovation, whether it's residential or commercial, has the opportunity to receive LRTA.
Right.
Yep.
LRTA per unit?
No, it's not per unit.
Okay.
On the project overall.
Just on the project.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And the other question that I had is, we talked about the rent in the project. It's not going to be affordable. He mentioned that question. Okay. And the other question I had, as far as the EPA concerns for constructing this project, I know when I was at the budget meeting, this is one of the reasons why we were talking about needing to raise issues. Has this project covered their own stormwater and sewer? Are they covering all that expense, or is that something that's going to roll over to the taxpayers?
So Mr. Campbell and Mr. Richards have been involved in a months-long conversation about how to address the stormwater on their property. We are in the midst of transitioning from our previous stormwater ordinance to our new stormwater ordinance. The city is in the midst of developing some additional policy guidance and updating our streetscape ordinance. To that end, we have reached an agreement related to the stormwater management that exceeds what is being done now. And I cannot give you those answers because that just got finalized last Wednesday. And so we can talk more about it, Darlene, but it's a sticky wicket. I'm just going to say that. And we are working very hard. And I will say that Mr. Richards was working very hard with us to come up with a solution to address the stormwater. And so this is going to be a conversation we'll be coming back to council to update council on and the public as we continue to move through workshopping, literally workshopping, how to equitably administer the new stormwater ordinance. But we're up to our eyeballs in it right now.
Okay. And the EPA, that's all being addressed by them, because I know we talked about some of the reason our taxes is we have to look at these new constructions that are coming in and meet the EPA requirements.
Well, the EPA is looking at the city holistically.
Okay.
It is not reviewing each individual project, but it is looking holistically, and we are in the process of negotiating with them our long-term control plan.
And Mayor Sirachi, this, as Mr. Smith mentioned, the sewer control, actually, Councilor Craig asked about it, the sewer control plan module that was before this goes directly to our EPA requirements. So that has been completed for this project.
All right, thank
To
you.
your question. Thank you. Additional comments on the project? Absolutely. Mr. Hopkins, if you could. Oh, if you're.
I got it.
Thank you.
I'm not against this project in any way. I understand everything that's being discussed, but what I have a problem with is, as someone who's worked in the city, not just in retail, I'm actually also a substitute teacher. Lancaster City is probably the lowest rated area in Lancaster County when it comes to its families. I had to leave an apartment building and ended up homeless because of all these new projects coming in. Another gentleman here spoke tonight about our homeless. I'm in a wheelchair. People like me can't afford all these luxury housing projects that are $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Okay, and it's again going back to what I said when the first time I was here, you're forgetting about your own local residents. I see the need to improve the city, I get that. But before we start worrying about bringing in people, whether it's for the hospital, the benefit of the hospital or not, we need to look at our own local residents, because the reason why we have homeless, the reason why I ended up homeless and losing my building is because my building got taken over by a big property management company and they jacked up the rent. Myself and 15 other residents got asked to leave because they wanted to renovate the apartments and they weren't willing to renew. We need to go back and focus on our own residents before we bring in something else. Lancaster City needs more affordable housing.
Thank you, Ms. Rosen. Any additional comments on the proposal? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Ahmed?
Aye.
Mr. Arroyo?
Aye.
Mr. Cleese?
Aye.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
And President Baker.
Aye. Thank you very much. Setting my agenda. We move then to ordinances for first reading this evening. We begin with Administration Bill number 26, 2022. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, amending Section 295-54 and 295-56 of the Code of the City of Lancaster to change the water rates for customers within the city limits effective January 9, 2023, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect as provided by Pennsylvania law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Again, this is a first reading this evening. This is up through the Finance Committee. I'll ask Mr. Hopkins if you I'll bring you up. You'll be up here a lot as we go through some of these this evening. But I'm wondering if you could, because we've discussed this on several occasions and looked at it at a couple of different angles, if you could contextualize the water rate increase for the average user, what that means, and some of the reasoning behind the need for that in this particular fund.
Sure. So I'll try to address without being able to put my slide up that I had at the budget presentation on Monday, December 5th. What I presented to council and the public then was a water rate survey, and typically when we've looked at the water rates inside the city and outside of the city that are part of the city's entire system, with the outside rates being controlled by the Public Utility Commission rate-making process, I've typically done those comparisons just to other Lancaster County water providers and for the sewer rates compared to other Lancaster County sewer providers. In the presentation that I made on Monday the 5th, looked at not just the other Lancaster County providers, but also to a number of different private water providers, some of which actually do provide service to areas either in Lancaster County or very near Lancaster County. With the proposed rate increase, and for the average residential customer, they use about 13,000 gallons of water per quarter. The city's proposed rate would move to $116.22 per quarter. Again, that's for the customer who uses that 13,000 gallons. That is right in the neighborhood of other providers. Mount Joy Borough, it's $115. York Water Company, the part of their system that provides water to the city of York, is $113.90 for that same service. And then there are some that are quite a lot higher. The Columbia Water Company is about $124 per quarter, and that goes all the way up to Aqua American, Pennsylvania. In one of their zones in Pennsylvania, their rates for that same water usage caps out at $253.74. So when we look at other Lancaster County providers and then look at some of these private water providers, we're pretty much in the middle of the pack. The ones additionally most of the providers that are significantly lower than the city, their water is coming from well sources, not from river sources like the Conestoga River or the Susquehanna River. And the reality is that those well sources require significantly less treatment than does pulling water out of either the Conestoga or the Susquehanna water plants. In terms of the need for the rate increase, it's really about covering the cost of the investments that we're continuing to make in the system. Director Campbell, gave you a long presentation about the public works budget in total and the water fund budget in particular. And really the most significant cost that we have is related to the capital investment. So it's the debt service, the repayments that we need to make in the water fund for borrowings that we've done to do capital improvement projects. And we've also seen some significant increases, especially in the area of chemicals, for the chemicals that go into treating water, where we have seen significant increases in those costs. And so as we see increases, the city is I'll just say the city is a victim of inflation as well as individual residents. We see cost increases in terms of the power generation, the power electric that we power the plants with the chemicals that we treat the water with. Obviously, on an annual basis, we also have increased labor costs for the personnel who are employed by the city to do that work. And then again, for the debt service that we have to pay back for the capital investment that we've made.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Again, this is a first reading, which I'm reminding myself of. Council comments on the ordinance.
Council President, if I may.
Councilor Ahmed.
Thank you. Director Hopkins, thank you for kind of contextualizing some of that. In regards to the debt service, and that being some of the core reasons why this raise was proposed, how is this going to look for our projection for a 5-year plan or for the future? because the prices may continue to inflate. So, what strategies are we looking at to kind of, mitigate any further increases, in the budgets down the road?
So I answer that in a couple different ways. One is that throughout 2022, we were working with PFM, a consultant that's Public Financial Management Group, who's worked with us in a number of different areas. One, looking at the general fund's 5-year projections and even going out a little bit more than 5 years. And then also basically doing the same type of analysis within the water fund itself. So that's one piece of it, in doing some financial projections so that we can look at capital investment, when we can go to the Public Utility Commission for rate increases. That is and I'll just say that the Public Utility Commission part of this is significant, because somewhere between 65 and 70% of the revenue that goes into the water fund actually comes from those customers who are outside of the city. They make up about 2/3 of the system, and the revenues from those customers is about 65 or 70% of the system revenues. That's one of our challenges, is that much of our revenue is effectively controlled by the Public Utility Commission rate-making process. The last piece I'll add in there is around capital investment. That's additional work that's been happening very much so within the Public Works Department, but also working with PFM to develop that 20, 25-year, 30-year capital investment plan within DPW, and then marrying that up with that financial plan that you're talking about to look at when we make investments, what is the timing of those investments, when can we get a rate return on those investments by going to either the Public Utility Commission or by coming in front of you again for proposed change in the rates. The reality is that over time, as we continue to have capital investment in the system, there will be rate increases. I mean, there really is no way around that when you're providing a service as important, as life important as water is, and clean water is. We have to make capital investment in the system. We have to continue investing in the plant. At the same time, we want those investments to not result in rate shock, so that we don't have significant increases all at one time. And that takes careful planning, not just over a 5-year period, but in these systems over 20, 25-year period.
Thank you. And I just have one follow-up question. If we did, per se, reduce some of these increases or, not have any increases at all, what would that do to our capital plans regarding the water fund? And how would our, debt refinancing look within the water fund?
Well, not doing the rate increase, I mean, it's an impact of revenues, right? So even as proposed, the water fund budget includes it is a deficit budget in 2023. Not having any of the additional revenues coming in from that rate increase would increase that deficit, ultimately get us into a position, if that would continue over a period of years, get us into a position where the funding isn't available either to pay the debt service. So we have made a taxpayer pledge to make sure that we're paying back debt service, but it also hampers just the operating capability of the Department of Public Works to maintain the plants, to maintain the transmission and distribution systems, to purchase chemicals for treatment. So there's multiple significant negative impacts from not having the revenues available for Department of Public Works to operate that system.
Council President, may I
Mayor Sarachi?
add something? Patrick, what year did the city take out a bond for $100 million for the micro filtration plant replacement?
The bond issue itself was done in 2007. The total bond issue was about $125 million, and about $100 million of that was for the new Conestoga water plant and the new Susquehanna treatment plant.
So we're producing about 36 million gallons of water every day, just to give you context, between the Conestoga plant and the Susquehanna treatment plant. That was the first major capital investment in the water plant 20 years at least.
Oh, maybe even since the Susquehanna plant was
Maybe,
built. in terms
okay.
of-
So I cannot underemphasize, the degree of deferred maintenance that we are paying for right now. So it was very interesting because the other day, Representative Sturla was remarking that he remembers 30 years ago having a conversation with the Director of Public Works at that time about building a redundant 42-inch main. That redundant 42-inch main has never been built. And 30 years ago, they were talking about that as a necessary investment in infrastructure because we only have one line that's moving water from our largest production facility, which is in Columbia, Pennsylvania, to support our water distribution area. And because that has never been done, we are now facing the second once-in-a-generation investment following those micro-infiltration investment into the two plants. So that 42-inch main is, we already put $20 million into that and another 8 or 10 into the construction of the water tower. We have 2 more phases of work to do, and the most expensive phase is $40 million alone, in addition to another $8 to $10 million for the third phase. This doesn't even go to some of the other capital costs that are needed for our system improvements, relining pipes, replacing pipes, upgrading pumping stations. We're going to get to some of it later in tonight's agenda. I just want to say that to contextualize the moment that we are in historically, because these investments weren't made in literally the course of my entire lifetime, that we are now playing catch up. And it costs, and we are literally paying for the very poor planning that happened before us.
Thank you for that context, Ms. Raji. Additional council comments?
Yeah.
Councilor Diaz.
At this point, we're projecting, we're speculating that this could be happening. Because when we think about more revenue that be coming in, whether it's grant money or anything that we can think of in the future, we're not including that. We're just going about it just in case this is what's going to happen. Is that correct?
No, it's not. I mean, this rate increase is needed to, well, the result of this rate increase, if it's approved as presented, wouldn't even bring the water fund budget up to balance in 2023. So this is, right now, what we're talking about is an immediate need for additional revenues within the water fund to maintain the current operations of the water system. The issue of grants, unfortunately, is, the reality is that we have not received a single grant for water system operations or capital projects, with the lone exception that I can think of about a $2 million grant that went into from the EPA that was for those water plants that were built in 2010. So that's $2 million out of about a $100 million project came from grants. Since then, there have been no grants. We're not able to get grants from the Penvest, from the Commonwealth Financing Agency. We haven't been eligible for grants from that entity. So our funding comes from ratepayers, and it comes from proceeds from bond issues. That's how we operate the system, and that's how we do the capital investment in the system.
Thank you, Patrick.
Councilor Craig.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I don't think anybody likes to have fees attached to, billing and things like that. But the downside of that would be if we don't have what we need to operate and if things don't get fixed that we need to get fixed, then we run the possibility of not having it at all. Lancaster City is one of the oldest inland cities in the United States with some of the oldest infrastructure that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Councilor Craig. Comments from the public? Ms. Byrd.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank Councilwoman Janet Diaz and Councilman Hamad. I did get the reports today at 5:43 that I requested. I have not had time to go through them. I do plan on doing that before this goes through. But I did want to speak on just raising the water bill $60, a year. It's a lot. It is a lot on homeowners. You just approved a project for 72 units, one studio, one bedroom apartment for people paying $2,000 in rent. They're going to take our LRTA money and not pay taxes. They'll pay taxes in increments of 10 years. So the first year they won't pay any of the taxes this deal. The next year they're going to pay 90%. And this is someone that's making money off of the city. And this is okay. But to council, because they approved it. But we're telling you, our residents can't afford a $60 a year increase in the water bill. Now, we talk about caring about affordable housing. Whatever measures that we made and got forward a little bit, this is setting us back. So every time you come to council and you're saying, oh, we're adjusting affordable housing, we're giving you 8 units. Then you come back and you say, well, we're going to raise the water bill $60. What happened to that affordable home anymore? It's no longer affordable. Council has to come up with a better solution. I understand that the water system hasn't been replaced. And maybe this ain't the year that we do it. We can't just keep adding on and on. And that's my comment until I look over it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Any additional comments from the public? Again, this is a first read. Hearing none? All right, we will take this back up on the 20th. That takes us to Bill number 27. Again, this is for a first read. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, amending Section 249-229 of the Code of the City of Lancaster to change the sewer rentals for customers within city limits effective January 9, 2023, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance will take effect as provided by Pennsylvania law.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Again, this is quite similar. Mr. Hopkins, I'll ask you to put this into a similar context for us regarding the reasoning behind the proposal, the impact of the proposal, and anything in context from your presentation on Monday. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll start with the same comparison that I talked about with the water system. So with the sewer rates, we did a similar review of the rates for that average. Typically, and this is the case in the city system, that the sewer bill is based on the amount of water used at the property. There are a number of sewer providers in Lancaster County and outside of Lancaster County that simply have a flat rate that they charge for what they call an equivalent dwelling unit, so essentially a household. The proposed rate that city residents would pay under the increase that's in front of you tonight for first reading, for that residential customer who uses 13,000 gallons of water per quarter would be $142.90. By comparison, the Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority, they have a flat rate billing of $132.50, so about $10 per quarter less. The Mountjoy and West Donegal Townships, they also have a flat rate, and that's about $13 more than the city's proposed rate. So their rate is $155. York Water Company in one of the boroughs that they serve, they have a rate of $170 per quarter. And then again, on up from there, up to, again, Aqua American has the highest rate in this one particular zone of their system. That results in a quarterly water bill for that 13,000 gallon user of $358.53. And then there are other providers that have a lower cost than that. And it really, a lot of that depends on the size of the system, the age of the system, and the age of the system is huge because much like our water system and the deferred maintenance and investment that the mayor talked about there is also true of the sewer system. One of the other major challenges that we have with the sewer system is the whole issue of combined sewer overflow that you are all aware of. We have a combined system inside the city that is, I believe, is about 2/3 of the city is a combined system. That brings other financial challenges because we're not only trying to deal with sanitary sewer from homes and businesses, but we're also trying to deal with stormwater. And not just stormwater itself, but the conveyance systems, the pipes, the sewer mains that are also aged. There are lots of sewer mains that are still brick lined. They're beautiful, brick lined, except when they're collapsing. But maintaining those parts of the system are extraordinarily expensive. And then, of course, we also have the same issues that I talked about with the plant itself in terms of the chemicals for treatment, power, other costs that go into the treatment system that drive those costs, and the capital investment that we have to maintain the pipes underground and also the treatment plant itself.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Council comments? And from the public? Ms. Byrd.
Yeah, Darlene Byrd. Again, I just want to say $96. We just talked about one resolution that would be, one ordinance that would be $60 a year. Now we're talking about adding an additional $96 on top of that. When does it stop, and when are we going to see council cannot continue to make their number one agenda affordable housing with these increases? It's not going to go hand in hand. It's not going to work. I asked council to look at Landis Homes. I forget how many affordable, was it 4 or 8 units they're going to build? How is this $200 of all the increases going to affect those 4 or 8 affordable homes that we're planning in the city? And we counted that, and we rejoiced over those little 8 homes that they put in the city. We rejoiced over that. And now here we are adding a $200 fee on that. And I think if we're going to talk about affordable housing, we got to look at this, because that's what's going to get passed down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Additional public comments for this evening? Again, this will come up in our next meeting on the 20th as well. Hearing none, thank you very much. That takes us to Administration Bill number 2028. Again, for first reading, Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, establishing appropriations of $4,500,000 of American Rescue Plan Act proceeds received in 2022, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect as provided by Pennsylvania law.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Again, this comes up under the Finance Committee. This is the planned amount that was in the 2022 budget for revenue replacement from the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And Mr. Hopkins, I'm just wondering if you could address a little bit about this particular figure, what that number could have been, and what's driving that decision and how we got to this amount.
Sure. So in the 2022 budget, that was approved in December of 2021, we included an amount from the American Rescue Plan Act for the revenue replacement, which is a specific provision in the American Rescue Plan Act, and that amount was $4.5 million. The revenue replacement that we're looking at is a comparison of the city's total revenues in 2021 versus 2020. So this is the second year that this measurement is being done. We waited until this time period because we had to complete the 2021 audit, and then we engaged our auditor, Mayor Dussel, to do that calculation to make sure that the calculation was in compliance with the U.S. Treasury rules. When Mayor Dussel did that calculation, again, comparing 21 revenues versus 2020 revenues, the total revenue, based on the Treasury rules, the total revenue loss amount that we could have pulled from ARPA was just over $9.5 million. Because what we had included in the general fund budget for 2022 was $4.5 million, that's why we're coming to you with that amount in this ordinance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hopkins. Council comments.
If I may, Council President.
Councilor Ahmed.
Thank you, Director. I know we talked about this a little bit in the budget hearing. When we don't have these ARPA dollars in the future to plug in for the revenue replacement, what are some of the ramifications if we don't plan accordingly that could result in further increases?
Well, so we have, if you can picture that 5-year projection that I had in the overview presentation last Monday evening, we've been describing as a fiscal cliff, right? We used in the 2021 budget a little over $4 million from ARPA, and with that we had a small surplus. In 2022, we're basically projecting to break even using $4.5 million of ARPA. So effectively, we have a $4.5 million structural deficit in this year's budget, or in this year's operating results at year end. In the 2023 budget, we have proposed to use $6 million from ARPA revenue loss, and then a projection of doing the same thing in 2024. So the money and ARPA authorization for revenue loss ends at the end of 2024. So 2025, we basically go back to what the world was like in some ways before the American Rescue Plan Act was adopted. So we start effectively with a minimum of a $6 million hole in that 2025 budget if we do nothing else. And it's why in that 5-year projection, I show what, based upon doing nothing else, keep status quo for the number of people that we employ in the city, the level of services that we provide on the expense side, and then really basically status quo on the revenue side with the exception of those few areas in the general fund budget where we have some level of natural growth in the revenues, and the most significant one of those, at least for the last several years, has been earned income taxes. But that natural growth in earned income taxes, which only makes up about 10 to 12% of the general fund budget, comes nowhere near to the fiscal cliff hole that we have with the end of ARPA funding. It's really the purpose of that 5-year projection is to have everybody, myself, the administration, members of city council, and the public focused on the long term, because, again, I always hate to be here during this time of year talking about the realities of the challenges that we have. But the challenge is that if we have no other source of revenues, if the state doesn't provide us with any other source of revenues that we have direct control over, we have some significant challenges coming ahead of us. We have a real estate tax that is already the highest in Lancaster County, that only brings in less than 50% of the revenues that we need to operate the city. We have essentially had status quo on the level of services that we provided. We've had the same number of police officers in the budget, the same number of firefighters in the budget since 2010. And it still costs more every single year to provide those services. So there are challenging decisions coming down the road in the not too distant future when ARPA revenue loss revenues aren't available to us anymore.
Thank you, Director. And just my last question. I know that these all tie in holistically with, some of the proposed rate increases in regards to water and sewer. Looking at, 2025, if we don't kind of make some of these proposed increases now, what situation do you think we would be in when we don't have those ARPA dollars to plug in?
Well, yeah, right. So theoretically, we could be pulling $9.5 million from ARPA, right? We would more than balance the general fund budget in 2023, and at the same time, and avoid a tax increase in 2023. At the same time, that just makes that fiscal cliff that much higher when we get to 2025. As challenging and as difficult as it can be, both from the administration side and from the city council side, and for the taxpaying public, of which I'm a member, incremental changes to the property tax rate, that because we have control over it, is one of the ways that we can get to a point where we have a level budget, a balanced budget over the long term. But we cannot economically develop our way out of the challenges that we have. And it is not realistic to say that all we need to do is just raise property taxes year after year after year, because the rate increases that would be required to fill that hole are more significant than anybody wants to see.
And I'll just add that we, as Patrick just pointed out, Director Hopkins just pointed out, we've made decisions to utilize those ARPA dollars in ways to advance affordable housing, and we have a community facilities RFP. If it is the intention to City Council, there is the option of using those more of the ARPA dollars to backfill and postpone any tax or fee increases as presented.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Council President. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Councilor Ahmed. Councilor Walsh?
Thank you, Council President. Patrick, how much of the ARPA dollars is left unallocated at present? Ballpark is fine.
So we have put $10 million toward affordable housing. We have used 4.1 roughly in last year's budget for revenue loss. We're using another 4.5 here, so we're up to 18.6 million of a total of 39.5 million. We also used $5.9 million for the purchase of the Oyster Point property for the water system, with the idea that that would essentially be paid back in the near future, and I mean in the next year or two, by the water system if it is going to be used for water system operations. Effectively, that would put that $5.9 million, sort of back in the bank for the purposes of ARPA-related expenses. Then if you add on $6 million in next year's budget, $6 million in the budget after that, now you're over $30 million. And then there's also been, with the community facilities RFP, the concept of putting a minimum of $5 million into being available for those purposes. When you add all of that up, you're very close to the $39.5 million that we have that we were awarded from ARPA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. Again, this is a first reading. Comments from the public?
Just two quick questions. One, I heard you say that we have the highest real estate taxes in the county, in the municipal rates. And when you made your comparison between the counties in deciding which municipality was charging what for water and sewer, did you take the taxes that they pay into consideration?
No, when those comparisons were done, it was only looking at water rates and then only looking at sewer rates. Some providers provide both. They provide both water and sewer, like the city. None of them have anything to do with taxes, and most of the water and sewer providers are authorities that in many cases cut across multiple municipalities. So the water rates and the sewer rates and taxes are disconnected.
There's no apples to apples comparison because of that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but it is, because when you look at how much a homeowner is paying, whether it's in taxes, water, or sewer, so these municipalities can afford to charge more for water and sewer because they're not taking it out of real estate taxes. So it does go in there when you're looking at the overall payment of a homeowner. And my other question was about the Oyster system that we're hoping is going to be used for water and $5 million, and we're hoping that that gets paid back next year. So when you were making your projections, was you including that 5 million coming back into our budget, or it's so iffy we didn't count it?
So when the Oyster Point property was purchased and that authorized by city council in, I think, October of last year, there was also a reimbursement resolution that was adopted at the same time that said, essentially within a 3-year period, that we would intend to pay back those funds with some sort of other financing for that purchase. The timing of it was driven really by the land being available, and if we didn't move at that time to purchase the property, which is immediately adjacent to the Oyster Point Reservoir, that is the reservoir for one of the main reservoirs for the entire system. If we didn't move at that point, the property would have gone into it would have gone on the market into private developers' hands and likely been developed as either, residential or commercial property. So it really was much like the other investments that we're talking about, as sort of a once-in-a-generational opportunity. It had been a family-owned farm before that. So that was the reason for the timing of the purchase. When if and when the repayment is made, because the property is going to be used for the water system, those dollars would come back to the city. They would not now have the ARPA requirements tied to them, because the expense was for the purchase of the property for future expansion of the water system, which is an eligible ARPA expense. In effect, the water fund would be financing that in another way, paying those dollars back to, just put this in air quotes, to the city. Those dollars wouldn't necessarily, they would basically fall to the city's fund balance. They wouldn't, and so they were not included in the 5-year projections of the general fund.
Because they're not there yet.
They're not there yet.
Thank you. Again, this is a first reading, so this will come up at our meeting on the 20th. And that takes us to item D on our agenda, resolutions. Just at the top of the resolutions agenda, I'd like to make mention that during the December 5th committee meeting, I made a mistake when motioning to move resolutions 93 and 94 forward. While I said the 13th, I should have said December 20th, because they are part of the budget package. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to table resolutions number 93 and 94 until Tuesday, the 20th.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Council comments on the motion? And from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Med.
Aye.
Mr. Royal?
Aye.
Mr. Cleese?
Aye.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
And President Baker.
Aye. And thank you for all of your understanding. All right, so that takes us to resolution number 89. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster requesting an H2O grant of $20 million from the Commonwealth Financing Authority to be used for the replacement of the raw water intake line and the large diameter transmission main water line.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the resolution. Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Council President. This resolution was discussed during the committee meeting in my, while I was absent, but as far as I understand it, that this is very much in line with what we were just discussing in regards to the incredible costs that the city burdens due to its aging infrastructure, specifically around for this particular application, the water treatment plant and the transmission lines that come off of it. So while the project as both Mayor Sirachi and Director Campbell had alluded to, the total project cost for this particular phase is $44 million. We are in search of grant funds in the amount as much as $20 million to replace the water transmission line. And I believe what this resolution does is allows the city to apply for and receive funding in that amount.
Thank you very much.
Director Campbell, do you have anything to add to that?
You may answer my question before I ask it. Good evening, Director Campbell.
Good evening, Council President. Good evening, everyone.
Oh.
Did you want to ask the question?
I will go ahead. So we were, in the previous discussion, we were mentioning how it is difficult to receive grant funding for things like our water and our sewer system. Can you describe how we got to this point, what makes us eligible for this, and what are the terms of this grant, should we receive it?
Well, we're very happily, we are in a situation where the federal government is making money available to address the infrastructure of the, throughout the United States. So this is one of those rarefied times where money is being made available to specifically address aging infrastructure. I want to be able to tell you a little bit of a story here. The water transmission mains that we're talking about were built in the 1940s. They're made of steel. Steel has a estimated useful life of about 60 years. The conversations that the mayor had talked about taking place a decade or more ago were trying to address the replacement of infrastructure that had already reached the end of its useful life. When I first came on board, literally within the first weeks I was on board, every other night or so we had water main breaks. They were not part of the steel infrastructure. If you remember, there was a water main break at Prince Street that plagued us for several weeks, as well as a variety of other water main breaks that were taking place. The water main breaks are, when we repair the water main breaks, this is largely out of the, in part it's out of the water and the sewer funds when it's a sewer break, but it's also the staffing, et cetera, is out of our general fund to be able to take care of those repairs. Just before COVID, in the first or second week of March, again, of the first 2-3 months I was here, we had a major break of one of those steel lines. And that's when it became very apparent to us that the transmission lines that provide 2/3 of the water to the city of Lancaster are in dire straits. Were they imminent to break and fall into disrepair? They were already rusting. And anything that we needed to do was going to be very, very expensive in the short run just to take care of that. So as quickly as possible, we did the key repairs. Repairs of that infrastructure is also very, very expensive rather than trying to do preventive maintenance and trying to prevent the situation from occurring in the first place. But we also entertained the idea that we needed to engineer the solution that had been avoided 20 years earlier. So we're now at year 82 of the useful life of infrastructure that had a 60-year useful life, and we're trying to make sure that these mains can be dealt with. So in large part, that's why we are so eligible for the funds that are being made available at the federal government level. There's no guarantee that we will get these funds. And as Patrick says, we rarely, if ever, have gotten grants to be able to do major infrastructure in the past. But we are making every attempt and identifying the sources of funding where we can to make these applications. These, whether we get this grant or not, we are still going to have to spend the approximately $44 million to be able to replace and ensure the maintenance of the transmission lines that provide water from the Susquehanna. And as I say, the Susquehanna Water Treatment Plant covers 2/3 of the water for the city. Conestoga covers 1/3. If we have a major break, it will adversely affect a large percentage of the population of the city of Lancaster, and I don't want to be talking disaster scenarios because I think we are maintaining them well, but we are putting Band-Aids on a system that is not meant to last as long as it currently is. So, yes, in that context, both of these administrative resolutions are asking for us to have the permission from council to make the applications for the grant funding that would help offset the cost of building the very necessary infrastructure, not only of these transmission lines, but the next resolution, as we'll mention, is related to the pumping station at Conestoga.
Thank you. Additional comments from council? From the public? Question was, when will we know? Just so it goes into the recording. Yes.
A very good question. The application cycle means that we'd be putting in the application within the next 2 to 4 weeks, I believe. And
It's
hopefully-
actually next week.
Oh, it's next week?
Mhm.
And that's why we were so adamant to get it done at these hearings. And hopefully within the following 6 to 8 weeks, we would have the answer.
There's a question about when we will know. We have the same question that you do, Darlene, because in the midst of the transition of leadership, these water projects are going through, I believe, the Commonwealth Financing Authority.
Yes.
And that board meeting may not happen in January per usual. It may happen in March. So we're trying to sort that part of it out. I'll just note that this is a direct result of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that were supported at the federal level. The state has appropriated $205.4 million of these to this grant program that is funding local governments only. It's not a lot of money for the amount of infrastructure that's necessary across Pennsylvania. And I want to temper my own expectations as well as our expectations collectively, because the maximum award is 20 million and we're going for it.
Sure. And that context that you provided earlier about a $125 million project. So 205 million doesn't go far when you look at all of the municipalities in Pennsylvania.
We could use half of it.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. And so just preemptively, the timeline, I'm assuming we'll get to the next one, but is that the same for the next grant application as well?
It's a different grant. It's still from the Commonwealth Finance Authority, but it's a slightly different timeline. Hopefully a little bit less time, we would know.
Great. Thank you. Just preemptively asked that one. Any additional comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Met?
Aye.
Mr. Arroyo?
Aye.
Mr. Cleese?
Aye.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
And President Beke.
Aye. Thank you. That takes us to Administration Resolution number 90. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster requesting a small water and sewer program grant of $500,000 from the Commonwealth Financing Authority to be used for upgrades to the Conestoga Low and High Service Pump Station.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Counselor Walsh?
Thank you, Council President. I believe this is in the same vein of the application. It's for the same agency. This project is a little bit different because this is a grant to upgrade the Conestoga Pump Station, specifically for upgrades to and including replacing windows, pumps, and screening with an overall project cost of $1.9 million. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say the max that you were allowed to apply for was $500,000.
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Otherwise, we would have gone for more.
Yeah, I figured as much. This seems very straightforward to me. Do you have any other pieces of information that you would like to add?
This is a combination of the pumping apparatus and this filtering apparatus at the pump station, as well as the windows and the things that protect the equipment at the pumping station. This is the primary water intake at the Conestoga Water Treatment Plant, and it is very necessary. The windows, in fact, we're going forward with their replacement as we speak. That's up to about $200,000 of the $1.9 million. The $500,000 would go towards the filtering apparatus and the other pump station requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Campbell. I don't have anything for you in this. Council comments? From the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Ahmed?
Aye.
Mr. Roya?
Aye.
Mr. Calise?
Aye.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
And President Bege.
Aye. Thank you. That takes us to Administration Resolution Number 91. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster appointing Mayor Dussel to provide professional services in conjunction with the city's independent fiscal audit for the years ending December 31st, 2022, 2023, and 2024.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the resolution. I can provide some background on this, and I may ask Mr. Hopkins to provide additional details. We are required to appoint auditors for the city. They do it's the single audit, is that what it's called for the city? And annual financial audits that we're required to do. We have been working with Mayor Dussel for a number of years, and that's the proposed firm that we would continue to work with. There was a cost study in the last round of these appointments, and their cost was in line, not the highest, not the lowest, but the price of bringing on a new auditor is quite costly. So weighing that against itself, it made more sense to stay with the same firm. Mr. Hopkins, do you have any additional context to add about staying with Mayor Dussel and what they provide to us?
Sure. In terms of the cost, the proposal for 2022, so this proposal covers the audits for 2022, 2023, and 2024. So when this year closes out, Mayor Dussel comes in and does their work in January, February, and then they come back and do additional work later on in the late spring and early summer to complete the audit, usually by the August, September time period. So the charges for the main financial statement audit, or the main financial audit and the production of the financial statements, and also the single audit, which is really about an audit of our use of federal funds, that any federal funds over $750,000 requires a single audit. The charge for that is $74,850. There's another fee that goes along with that of about, it's just under $5,000, so roughly $80,000. And that is looking at not just the $140 million roughly operating budget in the general fund, stormwater, sewer, water, and solid waste and recycling, but then also those federal program dollars primarily managed by the Community Planning and Economic Development Department, but the financial pieces are handled within the city's accounting office. So those are the costs. The services that Mayor Dussel provides to us goes beyond just the coming in and doing our audit, looking at our books and our financial system. They're also available throughout the year without additional cost for how to handle a particular financial issue, how to, when we do a bond issue, how to handle the accounting side of those bond issues, because especially when we do a refinancing, they're quite complicated on the financial side. When we do engage them for something specific like the ARPA revenue loss calculation, that's a separate engagement from these costs. But the normal, everyday, ongoing accounting work, consulting is included in the cost that I presented to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Are there additional council comments on the resolution? From the public? Ms. Byrd.
Just one question. We know that Patrick will be leaving. Is somebody stepping in, and is he training someone to know that? So 23, 24, when these auditors are looking at things, that we have this working relationship that's going to continue to go on? Is that happening now, or?
This will be a major transition, so you're right to point that out. Mayor Swati, do you have an update on that? I think we talked a little bit about
We have the position
Yeah.
posted, and we are in the process of recruiting. We are conducting a national search for the replacement of Mr. Hopkins as Director of Administrative Services. And Mr. Hopkins is going to be helping this transition. And I'll also just remind all of us, and I need this reminder almost every day, Mr. Hopkins is not leaving to go someplace where we can't be in touch with him.
Oh, I can.
He's
We
going
won't
to
let him.
continue to support the city. Yeah, he's going to continue to support the city. I think we all know where he lives.
Okay.
We're good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Ms. London. Hello.
Dana London, 200 block of North Broad Street. My question, real quick, how long have we been using the same auditor?
Patrick? I think this came up, but I can't remember the answer to it. I
So,
apologize.
Actually, they have been under the Mayor Dussel name, I think, since about 2007 or 2008, and we've been with the firm since then.
Great.
We've done, city council has approved reappointments in 3-year cycles. Several times during that period since they were originally engaged. They were engaged, they were under a different name. It was McConley and Asbury, and then Mayor Dussel took over. We have periodically done an RFP to seek out auditing proposals from a number of different firms. You referenced that earlier. The most important piece when looking at the services that an auditor provides in terms of fresh eyes on an audit, because you don't want the exact same people in an audit year after year after year after year, because they get used to what they're working, they get used to the people that they're working with, and they get used to the internal procedures and checks and balances within the system. So what Mayor Dussel, and this is standard, this isn't just them, this is pretty standard across auditing firms, is they may have the same partner who's involved, and in our case, it's been Jen Kruger-Kebe, but they turn the staff over who are doing the actual on-the-ground work. So what we'll typically see when they come to do what they call their field work is, we'll see maybe for a year, 2, I don't even believe we've had anybody for 3 years, the same staff. Might have 1 or 2 people who are the same, and the rest of them are new. So they have a regular turnover of the staff who might be assigned to the City of Lancaster audit, and then they'll move on to, Mayor Dussel does a lot of municipalities in Lancaster County and beyond. They're headquartered in Pittsburgh, but they actually have an office in Lancaster City over at Urban Place. So I'll stop there.
I appreciate that context. Thank you, Ms. London, for your question. Any additional questions from the public on the resolution? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Med?
Aye.
Mr. Arroyo?
Aye.
Mr. Calise?
Aye.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
President Beke?
Aye. That will bring us to resolution number 92. Mr. Harris?
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster appointing Kenneth M. Ember, 334 East Chestnut Street, as an alternate member of the City of Lancaster Zoning Hearing Board to complete an unfinished term through December 31st, 2024.
I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Counselor Calixte?
Thank you, Madam President. So there isn't much to say about this resolution. As it was discussed in our committee meeting on December 5th, it is a resolution of council to appoint Mr. Ember as an alternate member to the City of Lancaster Zoning Hearing Board. He has 20 years of diverse experience in landscape, architecture, and site planning. And the council had the opportunity to meet him at that meeting where he expressed his willingness to serve the community. And he shared his goal for the board with council. So this resolution states that Mr. Ember is being appointed to complete an unfinished term through December 31st, 2024. And so that's the end of it.
Thank you, Counselor Cleeks. I would also offer additional context on this, is that this is a particularly active and important board for us, but it only has 3 members, or 5? 3 regular and 2 alternates. So because of a resignation, it was important that we get another alternate in there. So this timing was quite important. Is that correct? Thank you. Additional council comments on the resolution? Comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Ahmed?
Aye.
Mr. Royo?
Aye.
Mr. Cleese?
Aye.
Ms. Gregg?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
And President Beke.
Aye. And with resolutions 93 and 94 tabled until Tuesday, the 20th, that concludes our legislative agenda. We now move to our second public comment period. Open for comment about any issues that were not listed on the agenda. Again, if you're making comment during this period, please begin with your name and block of residence. Comments are limited to up to 3 minutes. I don't see Mr. Christian, who was scheduled to speak earlier this evening, so if there are any others, this would be the time. Ms. Byrd.
Darlene Byrd, 200 block of South Ann Street. I just want to touch on the public safety issue, with the shootings and stabbings that's been going on. In the southeast, we have a lot of shootings that's going on. We had the young man that was killed behind Tanae Darby's house just recently. We had a young man shot on the 200 block of South Ann Street. And I guess I'm looking at it as we're looking at the budget as well and talking about increases. What are we doing to provide better public safety? If you're going to say we got to increase the policing budget, maybe by getting them cars or whatever we may be increasing, what is that doing to help make our neighborhood safe? Because we're seeing more and more of this. And, we haven't been coming up making a lot of noise about it, hoping that it would get addressed by concerned council members. But it is serious. And now we hear over on Ross Street area, we just had the killing on Ruby Street, down on Prince Street. And, we're not addressing it. And we really need to take a better look at that. I think council and the mayor does not take advantage of the neighborhood groups that could help in putting safety in the neighborhood. It helps if you give us what we need to keep our neighborhood safe. We have that experience. We have been doing that since 1989. So we know how to do that. And it would be good if council and the mayor would come and say, what is it that you need to keep it safe? Because we brought it to that point of safety that we brought our own gentrification on in our neighborhood, because now people feel safe. They're willing to spend $200,000 to live on Ann Street. Now when we see these crimes and shootings and killings going on, it's going to go backward. So that's my comment. I also want to say, I know I'm talking a lot about the budget. I want to say something positive, and I'm putting on my Democratic hat. We are in a good position. We have a new governor coming in. We don't have to keep looking at things in despair, as I think we might have had we not won. Even at the federal level, I think we have a better chance of getting the funds that the municipalities need. And so when we're looking at these 5-year projections, we can't say we elected a governor in Pennsylvania and we're not going to get any help, because something don't add up there. So I think when you're looking at this budget and you're looking at the 5-year projection, we know for the next 4 years, we're in a good position. We have all Democratic council. We should be looking more positive and saying, not seeing the doom, but seeing some positive things that are happening within our own political system that's making our outcome look better than worse. We can't stay in the inflation forever. So there will be a time, I hope, that we will be able to, if we have to raise taxes, be able to do that. But we're not there right now. We haven't increased the wages. People are not getting paid anymore, but the housing cost is more. So we have to kind of work that out in between now and then. But I do see our future getting better than worse. So when we're looking at our projections, I hope we can start looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Are there additional public comments this evening? All right, hearing none, that will take us to the report of the mayor this evening.
Thank you, Council President. I'm going to keep my report very brief. I said this in a statement yesterday, but my thoughts are not far from the victims and the families that have been affected by gun violence across our city. And we know that this has happened in the southeast, the southwest, and the northeast sections of our city. And the murder-suicide that happened Sunday night is particularly troubling because, the article that was in the paper about those moms trying to figure out what happened is just heartbreaking. I also want to say that in the midst of all that's been happening, our officers retrieved 2 guns from 2 17-year-olds that were driving around the city. We pulled another illegal gun off the street yesterday on New Holland Avenue, along with, and this is breathtaking, 900 sleeves of fentanyl. 900 sleeves of fentanyl. That was in addition to crack cocaine and a laundry list of other prescription drugs. Our police are working to keep this public safe, and I understand and appreciate the concerns that were elevated tonight by a young mother, by a longtime community resident who's been fighting to keep South Ann Street safe, as well as other concerns that I have heard. And I will just say again, it will take all of us to continue to keep our public safe. And there is not a single thing that any of us can do alone to do that, but that we have to continue to pull in a direction and continuing to support the kind of work that's happening across the city. I'll just end with saying the budget hearings on Saturday, and I know that's tough for council right now because you have a lot in front of you in terms of rate increases, but I hope the other thing that shines through is the dedication of the civil servants that serve the city and the kind of work that is going in to try to make the city better. And I always am so proud after those budget hearings are done because it is an opportunity to really get a kind of look into the accomplishments over the last year as well as the work ahead. And so as we close out 2022, there is a lot of work yet to be done. And in my view, there's a lot that we've accomplished together. And I look forward to these closing weeks of this year, as we plan and look ahead for 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sirachi. That takes us to the report of President of Council. I do not have a report this evening. Are there reports from other councilors this evening?
If I may, Council President.
Councilor Arroyo?
Just wanted to give a special thank you to Chief Mendez and the police department. The incident that happened on Sunday night happened in my neighborhood. And after hearing the gunshots, the police response was extremely immediate. So just want to express my gratitude, neighbors' gratitude for the quick response of our police department. And, hopefully, praying for our city during this time.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Being at the conclusion of our agenda, I will hear a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.